The door to the building swung backwards and forwards in the breeze, and as they looked inside they could see very little at first. Gradually their eyes grew accustomed to the gloom, and they stepped carefully inside. The floor was covered in a thick layer of sand and dust, blown in through the empty windows by 10 years of desert storms. Broken furniture and glass lay here and there, while on the wall an old picture of some long-forgotten Kazbaki starlet fluttered backwards and forwards as the breeze caught it, then fell to join the rest of the rubbish. Welcome to Behind the Bottom Line. I'm James Schofield, the creator of this podcast, which has my short stories that were originally written for different magazines and publishers. This is season 9, and we're in episode 7 of a thriller set in the diamond industry called Seven Continents. What is happening in this episode? Well, Macey Church is busy interviewing possible suspects at the Seven Continents headquarters and getting ready to go to the opera with Roy Marsden. But before the overture even begins, she's about to see something rather peculiar. Meanwhile, across the other side of the world, Kirill and Irina are going to break into an abandoned Seven Continents diamond mine in Kazbakistan, so it looks like everybody is in for some surprises. I hope you've got yourself a nice hot beverage and you can sit back and enjoy yourself, make yourself comfortable and listen up. 13. A Night at the Opera. Dmitry Mishkovich, head of project and environmental management, and Eamon Fitzroy, the chief financial officer, were waiting for Macey in the boardroom when she arrived at Seven Continents the next morning. Nancy told us all about you, Macey. She said we can tell you all the company's dirty secrets, said Eamon with a wink. He was about 45, tall, and wearing a well-cut suit. He made a striking contrast to Dmitry, who was small and round, and whose suit didn't seem to fit any part of him at all. Not that we have any, Miss Church. Eamon will make funny jokes, yes? He had a permanently worried expression on his face, and a strong accent that made what he said difficult to understand at first. Now, Dmitry, that's just not true, replied Fitzroy. I've been embezzling money from the company for the last 2 years, and I know for a fact that you get kickbacks from all your subcontractors. And as for Gilbert, what about that slush fund he set up for bribing politicians overseas? Dmitry sighed heavily. You see, my problem is difficult with colleague like Eamon, no? He take nothing serious. Don't worry, Mr. Mishkovich. My elder brother was exactly the same. I found the best thing to do was not to listen to a word he said. Fitzroy laughed. You're right, of course. Now, what would you like to know? Let's see what we can tell you. As in her interview with Nancy the day before, Macey had the feeling that although they had a lot of stories to tell about Villiers, they were not the source of the campaign against him. They respected him for his business skills and liked him as a person. Macey was not going to have anything to report to Marsden that evening. Finally, in desperation, she decided to mention the topic openly. I understand there have been some strange messages appearing on the website recently. Do you think anybody might have a grudge against the company? Do you think Sir Gilbert could have enemies? All successful businessmen make enemies, Dmitry sighed. Otherwise, they wouldn't be successful. He shook his head sorrowfully, as if saddened by the wickedness of the world. To be honest, Macey, these messages are probably the work of a crank, you know. continued Fitzroy. It's probably just some eco-nutter, or somebody that was fired. Or maybe Hujink Eamon. He really hates him, added Dmitri thoughtfully. That's true. Who's Hujink? Both of them looked surprised. Piet Hujink, the London head of Durban Diamonds, said Fitzroy. And that was when Macey first heard about the feud between Gilbert Villiers and Piet Hujink. Although Macey was not expecting to enjoy her evening with Roy Marsden as her companion, she put a lot of thought into her outfit for the opera. Having taken everything out of her wardrobe and dumped it on her bed, and having tried at least 6 different combinations, she finally decided on a red satin dress with a large belt that emphasized her waist. She put on a little makeup, her pearl necklace and earrings, and a black cashmere shawl to protect her from the evening chill, and ordered a taxi. The taxi dropped her off outside the entrance to the Opera House in Bow Street, about 10 minutes early. Macey decided she wanted to arrive a little bit late for her evening out with Marsden, so she went into the foyer and wandered towards the bookshop. She wanted to see if there were any pictures of Tatiana as a ballerina. She was about to go in when she suddenly froze. On the other side of the shop was Roy Marsden. He was deep in conversation with a tall man in evening dress who seemed to be emphasizing something important to Marsden. Marsden's manner intrigued her. It was almost ingratiating, as if he wanted something from this person. She wondered what, but turned and left before she was spotted. She went back through the foyer and waited for Marsden to arrive, which he did a few minutes later, looking slightly flustered. "I hope you haven't been waiting long," he said. "I only just left the office, I'm afraid, and rushed straight here. Let's go in." To Macey's relief, Marsden was quite a pleasant theatre companion. He ordered drinks and canapes for the interval and bought 2 programmes, which she found considerate. He didn't show off and tell her how many different productions of Othello he had seen and why one singer was better than another. And when the curtain went up, he concentrated totally on the stage. She gradually relaxed and was able to enjoy the performance. At the interval, as they headed towards their food and drink, she was able to thank him and really mean it. He was pleased. "Who's your favourite character in Othello?" he asked. Macey thought for a moment. "Desdemona. She's straightforward, honest, and says what she thinks of Othello when he's being an idiot." Marsden laughed. "Is that how you are, Macey? I could imagine it." "I like Iago best. Othello is, as you say, an idiot. All that jealousy over nothing at all. And Desdemona is arrogant. She won't compromise. She won't look at what is happening and change her tactics. And so she ends up being murdered for something she didn't even do. But Iago, he's really smart. He plays everybody against everybody else, and they don't realise what's going on at all. But he gets caught, Macey objected. That isn't too clever. Yes, well, that's the difference between fiction and real life, replied Marsden with a cynical smile. A little more to drink? As they ate and drank, Macey outlined the little she had learnt from her morning's interview with Dmitri Mishkovich and Eamon Fitzroy. There was one thing, though. They mentioned that if anyone disliked Sir Gilbert, it would be Pete Hudjink, the head of the London office for Durban Diamonds. Ridiculous. Hudjink may have a bad reputation, but he's a businessman. Playing this sort of game would be far too dangerous for him. He'd do a risk-benefit analysis and decide it wasn't worth it. You know what? I think they're covering for themselves. Well, I'll find out more on Thursday. Eamon is taking me out to lunch at the Savoy. He said it was the price I had to pay if I wanted to find out more about Sir Gilbert. Gilbert tells me he has a reputation as a ladies' man, you know, Marsden said with some irritation in his voice. You should be careful you're not influenced. Oh, don't worry about me, Roy. He's really not my type. Marsden leant forward and looked into Macey's eyes. Well, what about me, perhaps? We could have some dinner together after the opera, at my place. It's very close. I don't think so, Roy. He looked disappointed for a moment, but recovered quickly. I see. What might be the problem with me and Fitzroy then? Mr. Solokov, perhaps? Or are we the wrong nationality, the wrong age, the wrong colour, star sign, income, gender? Macey put her head on one side, as if she needed to think about it. Can I just say yes to all of the above? For a moment she thought she'd gone too far. Then he laughed. Whatever his faults, he had a sense of humour. Well, I like to bet occasionally, you know, Macey. £50 says I can change your mind before the end of these 2 weeks. Macey smiled. Sorry, Roy, I never gamble, which in this case is a shame. That would be the easiest £50 I ever earned. At that moment the bell for the next act rang. Marsden picked up his programme and handed Macey her shawl. As they approached the door, the man Macey had seen in the bookshop with Marsden walked past them, going in the other direction. The two men nodded briefly to each other and walked on without exchanging a word. Well, there's a coincidence, said Marsden. That was Pete Hudjink. Chapter 14. Going Underground. The next morning, with Roxana's great-grandson as their guide, Kirill and Irina left the yurts, goats and camels behind them and started the climb up into the hills where 7 continents had had their mine. The path was not dangerous, but was rocky and steep, and Kirill quickly realised that his London office regime of meetings, photocopying and trips to the coffee shop was not good preparation for breaking into an abandoned mining complex. Both of them had rucksacks, Irina's with food and water, while Kirill's had some tools from the Land Rover that was rapidly becoming a small dot in the oasis behind them. We may need them, was the short answer she gave when Kirill complained. Where did Roxana learn English? He panted as they had a break to drink some water. Doesn't she speak Russian? Of course, but she doesn't want to, explained Irina. Russian was the official language in Kazbakistan for 70 years, so the Kerkomen hate it. But English was something she learnt from the television. For many years there was a teaching program on the television, and many of them would sit and watch it whenever they could. Now it's gone, and the children all watch MTV instead. They learn the strangest things. What is this word, chillax? By midday, they finally reached the perimeter fence of the mine. Their small guide waved goodbye and disappeared rapidly back down the hillside. Happy at the extra chocolate bars he had earned from Irina, but glad to leave them alone with the unpredictable spirit world. They crawled through a hole in the fence next to the locked and rusty gates and looked around. Upside down on the ground was an old dusty board, bleached by the sun, which provided a guide to the different buildings spread around on either side of them. What are we looking for? Asked Irina. Now we're here. I'm not sure, Kirill admitted. Something that explains what happened here 10, 11 years ago? Something that links it with Gilbert? Look, the central block on the plan has the administration sections and the laboratories. Let's try there. The door to the building swung backwards and forwards in the breeze, and as they looked inside, they could see very little at first. Gradually their eyes grew accustomed to the gloom, and they stepped carefully inside. The floor was covered in a thick layer of sand and dust, blown in through the empty windows by 10 years of desert storms. Broken furniture and glass lay here and there, while on the walls an old picture of some long-forgotten Kazbaki pop starlet fluttered backwards and forwards as the breeze caught it, then fell to join the rest of the rubbish. Across the other side of the room was a black hole, where lift doors had once been, and next to it, behind a half-open metal door, they could see a steel spiral emergency staircase leading into the ground. Although the floor indicator for the lift only showed 2 floors below the surface, the light from their torches didn't reach the bottom when they shone them over the edge. So Kirill dropped a small stone to measure the depth. The banging and clattering as it bounced from side to side off the broken equipment seemed to last a very long time. They looked at each other. "Hope we didn't wake up any ghosts," said Kirill, trying to sound more cheerful than he felt. "So do I," replied Irina, without returning his smile. "Ugh! What is that?" The smell of something very dead wafted up the shaft, making them both jump back. "Some animal probably took shelter in here from a storm and fell down the shaft, I imagine." Kirill looked at his watch. It was midday. "Ready?" They turned on their torches and slowly started to descend the staircase. The colder air underground was at first a relief after the heat from outside, but gradually Kirill found it chilling. When they reached the first level, he pulled on a jacket which Irina had insisted he bring. To their left was a door, open but half blocked by pieces of concrete and twisted metal. "That was 100 steps, so we're maybe 30 meters underground. Let's see what's in here," said Kirill, and carefully climbed over the rubble before shining his torch around inside. It was an old control room where once the operators could monitor the whole mining process. The empty consoles and computer racks were all that remained, decorated only with a few labels and warning instructions of what to do in the event of fire. "Look, Irina." She came over to see what he had found. Stuck to one of the desks was a floor guide. "So, this was the control room, and through that door must have been the washrooms for the miners. But how does that help us?" "Look what it says is on the next level. Acid washing laboratory. That could be significant." "I don't understand," said Irina. "I thought diamond mining used mainly water to sift out the stones." "Yes, but remember, towards the end they weren't finding much. There's a technique for cleaning and getting more stones out of the crushed rock using hydrochloric acid. But unless you control very carefully what happens to the waste liquids, you can cause terrible damage to the environment. Perhaps that's what happened to the oasis. Shall we carry on down?" "Let's have something to eat before we go on. I'm hungry," said Irina. Kirill took out one of the flat loaves the Kerkomen had given them from Irina's rucksack, broke it in two, and put some chocolate inside each piece. They stood facing each other, their faces lit weirdly by the torches, munching silently. Kirill was thinking how difficult it was to imagine Tatiana, with her face covered in dust, eating stale bread and chocolate underground, when he felt something run over his foot. He jumped back and swung the torch around, just in time to see a rat scuttle across the floor. "Ugh!" he said. The rat stopped by the door, sat up on its hind legs, and gnawed at the piece of bread it had seized from the floor at Kirill's feet. Kirill kicked a stone across the room at the creature, which glared in contempt at the humans, turned, and disappeared into the darkness. "What can it live on down here? There can't be that many people choosing this place for a picnic." "Each other, I expect," replied Irina. "And anything that breaks its neck falling down the lift shaft." She laughed and swung the rucksack onto her back. "I don't think that one liked you very much. Come on, down to the next level." Kirill followed reluctantly, his heart beating fast. He didn't want Irina to know, but he was very afraid of rats. Oh dear, poor old Kirill. I'm very glad I'm not in his boots. Anyway, I hope you found today's episode entertaining, and if you did, tell your friends about it, and please rate the story on Apple or Spotify, or better still, write a review on my website, www.behindthebottomline.com. Next week in episode 8, Kirill and Irina have to carry on down the stairs into goodness knows what horrible situation. Macey, on the other hand, gets to go for lunch at the Savoy. I think I know whose situation I'd rather be in. If you'd like to buy the book or the ebook version of 7 Continents, you can do so by visiting my bookshop on my website, www.behindthebottomline.com. There you can also find Peril in Venice, a thriller full of drugs, murder and adventure set, of course, in Venice. And also a romantic comedy, Double Trouble. Nicholas and Timothy Aldridge, identical twins with very different lifestyles, change places and cause huge amounts of trouble before finding fortune and true love, all brought about by a rather difficult goat. So, until next week, take care and goodbye.